Hello and welcome to Charting with Dan. I am Dan Murrell. My usual co-host Roth Cornett couldn't be here today, so I've got who better to talk about box office business with than our own Billy Business.
Dude, I'm pumped because Black Panther, it's still making waves a week later. I couldn't believe it.
I was so excited by it, I changed sides. I changed the side that I sat on. Because why not? We're mixing it up. Why not mix it up all the way? Yeah, Billy, let's look at the top five. We always knew that Black Panther was going to be number one, but it held remarkably well. It had a second weekend gross of over $111 million. Wow. That is the best second weekend of any Marvel movie, both in total box office dollars and percentage. It dropped less than 50%, which Roth Cornett herself predicted on this set last week. And as it also happened last weekend with the box office estimates, they went up day by day. So first it was projected to do 90-something, then 102, then 108, and then it came in at 111 million. So Black Panther continues to roll up historic grosses, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, where it stands as far as second weekends and its overall run. But a phenomenal success. And again, just looking at the percentage, a movie that opened over $200 million and dropped less than 50% is pretty rare.
Yeah, in this day and age especially, there's so many choices, so many movies, but this is clearly an event. It's a cultural phenomenon. You can't show up to work, you can't show up to school if you haven't seen Black Panther.
No.
Like, what's there to talk about?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to look at, because a lot of people after last week said, oh, those all look like fancy numbers, but you know, you're always talking about adjusting for inflation. Where does Black Panther stand when you adjust it for inflation? We will talk about that in just a few minutes. But I wanted to go over the rest of the top five. Game night opened at number 2. It opened up a little bit the higher end of its tracking based off of some surprisingly solid reviews, including mine here at ScreenJunkies News and many other critics. Opened over $17 million. That easily beats lackluster openings from other R-rated comedies like Rough Night and The House last year. This was closer to the opening of Horrible Bosses 2, which ended up grossing $54 million here domestically. However, word of mouth and reviews are much, much, much stronger for Game Night than Horrible Bosses 2. However, it is caught in a maelstrom of Black Panther and in a couple of weeks, A Wrinkle in Time. So we'll see if the solid word of mouth is enough for Game Night to like it out.
I mean, comedies, it hasn't been a good time for comedies the last couple of years. Even over the holidays, we saw Daddy's Home 2 and Bad Moms Christmas. They got knocked down pretty hard. So this is the first comedy I've heard in a while that people are like, oh, you should actually go see this. It's actually not bad.
Yeah, and the good thing about comedies is they don't really have a shelf life.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and they do thrive on word of mouth. So
the good ones don't have a shelf life.
The good ones don't have a shelf life. The bad ones tend to have a shelf life of like 2 weeks.
Right.
But if it can find the real estate, we'll see how it can roll out. But again, just to have a solidly reviewed R-rated studio comedy in this era,
it's been a while.
It's been a while, and there's certainly few and far between. Number 3, Peter Rabbit, holding strong, bringing its domestic haul. His, yeah. It's Peter Rabbit. Yeah, bringing in some carrots. Over $70 million. Peter Rabbit doesn't really start its international rollout in earnest until next month. Opening at number 4 is Annihilation, which I'm not going to go into right here because I went a little crazy over the weekend and emailed Roth, and I was just like, Roth, this wall of text is like, I want to do this on Charting. She was like, I think maybe you should just do this on your own.
It's like your version of the Post. You're like, this has to come out.
There were strings attached, there were walls, and so this is actually a separate video that went up earlier today about Annihilation, why it opened in 4th place. It opened in 4th place at about $11 million. How it's tied into Skydance Media, David Ellison, Terminator Genesis, Flyboys, Geostorm. It goes all over the place.
Anytime James Franco is involved, I know there's a conspiracy.
Franco is in there somewhere. Yeah. So if you wanted to see more about Annihilation, check out that video. It's up right here on ScreenJunkies News. But Annihilation does open at number 4 with $11 million. It actually had a solid per-screen average over $5,000 because it played on only about 2,000 screens, which is the low side for a wide release. Game Night, for example, played on 3,500 screens this weekend. Okay. So we go into that in the video, along with some other reasons about why Annihilation underperformed this weekend. If you are an international viewer, you will start to see Annihilation on Netflix in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. So keep an eye out on that. It's a shame you're not going to be able to see it on a big screen, but at least you'll be able to see it somehow. And if it is playing anywhere near you, which after this week it probably won't be, if it was to begin with, I would still recommend checking that out. Number 5, 50 Shades Freed. That drops to 5th place.
Oh, what a tragedy.
I know, right? 50 Shades Freed will easily be the lowest grossing of the 50 Shades trilogy here domestically and probably internationally. But the franchise has earned over $1.2 billion worldwide, so they're fine. And finally, it is the end of an era. This is the first time since Christmas that the top 5 does not include Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and or The Greatest Showman. They both had typical drop-offs for them this weekend, 28 and 32% respectively. They are two of 2017's biggest box office success stories. Jumanji has now earned over $380 million domestically. It has earned over $920. It is approaching the $1 billion mark worldwide, with Japan still on the release schedule. Greatest Showman has earned $160 million domestically and over $350 million worldwide. Two movies that defied the traditional thing that you don't go up against Star Wars. They both went up against Star Wars, and they both had a shocking amount of box office success.
Yeah, I don't want to say they're the little engine that could, but they're the medium engines
They were,
that weren't supposed to and somehow did. Yeah, especially with Greatest Showman is interesting because it didn't seem like that was getting the best reviews, and it was almost critic-proof at a certain point.
It was 100% critic-proof. I mean, it got mixed to negative reviews, and historically it is one of the, along with like Titanic and Avatar, we talked about it a few weeks ago, one of the movies with the best legs ever. I mean, that movie just keeps going. And Jumanji, again, just dropping out of the top 5 here in late February, opening in late December against Star Wars and all this, against Black Panther and all this other competition that's come through. A really unexpected windfall for The Rock and Sony and everyone over with Jumanji. So congratulations. And it still runs. Again, still has Japan, a big international market on the release schedule. Before we move on to Black Panther, also, as always, we like to look at the top per screen earner, and this weekend it was a movie that's actually been playing for a while here on U.S. screens. It is an anime film called Mary and the Witch's Flower. It had a run in the States earlier this year. They had a special event this weekend on only 3 screens, and it took the per screen crown. This film is the debut movie from the Japanese company Studio Ponok, and was directed by Hiromasa Yonebayashi. I'm probably not going to pronounce any of this right.
You nailed it.
He was the key animator on several Hayao Miyazaki movies, including Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away. So, a lot of times you'll see, I think this is run by Fathom Events. They'll run these things, special weekend screenings, classic movies. It's had a special screening for Mary and the Witch's Flower, and not a bad per screen average for 3 screens.
You can't deny anime fans. They're a niche audience, but they will come out in droves.
They will show up. Yeah. They will definitely show up. So, Billy, let's talk about Black Panther and its second weekend. Let's talk about, first of all, in the comic book genre weekend, and domestically, Black Panther rules the roost. It had the best second weekend performance of any comic book movie ever domestically. Topping the Avengers. And again, if you look at it percentage-wise, all of these movies had drops between 50 to almost 60%. Black Panther dropped only 44.7% from last weekend. Now, that is from the 3-day Friday to Sunday. That's how these things are calculated. Friday to Sunday number. But again, 3-day weekend beating the Avengers, Age of Ultron, The Dark Knight, Captain America, Civil War. So... we knew this movie had legs, but it is showing the best case scenario kind of legs that you would want from an event movie, a superhero movie.
Yeah, I wonder, I never thought I would say this, but it's like Infinity War has a lot to live up to at this point. I mean, that's impressive, and I wonder if Black Panther is going to start to be at the center of a lot of their marketing for Infinity War.
It's going to be very intriguing to see what they do as they market Infinity War in the same way that Justice League unexpectedly had to deal with Wonder Woman being such a breakout success.
Right.
That they're almost overshadowed by it. If Infinity War opens below Black Panther, which, again, this is historic. The way that Black Panther opened, that is an historic number. Infinity War can have a fantastic opening and still not beat that number. So it'll be, I don't know. I think you're going to see a lot of Wakanda in the ads for Infinity War is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there was already a healthy smattering of Wakanda already, but I think, I knew this movie was going to be big.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to be this big, and it's fantastic.
Well, speaking of how big it actually was, let's widen out a little bit and look at the top 5 second weekends for a domestic release ever. Black Panther had the second best second weekend
Wow.
of any movie ever released domestically. Again, not adjusting for inflation, which we'll talk about. Topping Jurassic World, just under Star Wars The Force Awakens. It tied Jurassic World as the second fastest movie to reach $400 million domestically. It reached that mark in just 10 days. Jurassic World also took 10 days. Force Awakens took 8. Black Panther is currently number 26 on the U.S. all-time domestic charts. But as I mentioned a lot last week, a lot of people said, well, these all sound like fancy numbers, but if you adjust for inflation, they don't mean anything. And I will agree that it's not it's not number 26 when you adjust for inflation. But adjusting for inflation right now today, Black Panther sits at number 142 on the all-time domestic earners list. It has passed this is adjusted gross of Toy Story, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and The Incredibles. So not to this point. It has already out-earned domestically, adjusted for inflation, those movies, which I think are pretty, and the original Guardians of the Galaxy as well, pretty remarkable movies. In the next week or so, it's going to crack the top 100, and it will pass the domestic adjusted grosses of movies like Top Gun and Shrek and The Matrix Reloaded. So again, yes, those numbers do come down when you adjust for inflation, but we are talking about a movie that in less than 3 weeks of release is going to become one of the top 100 most successful movies, box office-wise, ever, adjusted for inflation. And again, Top Gun, Shrek, Matrix Reloaded, Toy Story. These are huge movies that had huge cultural impacts, that had massive financial impacts, made a lot of money for their studios. This movie is passing them all like they're standing still. So, yes, when you adjust for inflation, Black Panther isn't quite as far up those charts. However, it kind of broadens the picture a little bit, and you do see how fast it's passing these movies. And again, I think that even looking at that big picture, it's undeniable the economic and social and cultural impact that this movie is having, and just how damn popular this thing is.
I mean, even looking at that last chart that was just up, I mean, Force Awakens was the first Star Wars movie with those characters in 30 years. This is the 18th Marvel movie in this series. Usually franchises peter out around 3 or 4.
Yeah.
We're at 18.
We're at 18.
And we're hitting potentially our biggest one yet. It's incredible. And then, just like we were talking earlier, if you make a product for an audience that wants it, an audience that is underserved, and it just so happens to be a good movie, people are going to want to pay to go see it.
Yeah.
I mean, they are over and over.
Yeah, they're a repeat business. And again, I looked at some of the demographic breakdowns. The demographic breakdowns from weekend 1 to weekend 2 were almost exactly the same, meaning that there wasn't an audience that waited to go see it the second weekend versus saying it's a 4-quadrant movie. It's playing to all audiences. It's playing to all ages. It is playing to all socioeconomic groups, and people are going back to see it. And in the same proportion, in the same numbers, weekend to weekend. That means you've done a damn good job of making a movie, and you've done a damn good job of marketing that movie.
Yep.
So
I think Marvel's they're going to be okay after some of the bigger guys decide to step away.
I feel like this Marvel people, they might be okay.
they might know what they're doing.
They might just make it. Let's look at the 2018 domestic box office chart. Not much change on this chart this week. Black Panther remains on the top, where it will be for quite some time, with $400 million through 2 weekends of release. That is going to go up to, I would anticipate, at least $500 million. We'll see where it tops out. Peter Rabbit takes a jump, $70 million. Insidious, Maze Runner, they're dropping down. 6 through 10 stays the same. Death Wish and Red Sparrow open domestically here. This weekend, Eli Roth's remake of Death Wish with Bruce Willis. Probably not going to be on that chart. Jennifer Lawrence, spy drama, Red Sparrow. Next weekend, we see 4 new releases, including from Disney, Ava DuVernay's A Wrinkle in Time. That will be Black Panther's first major test against another big tentpole event film. We'll see how it fares against that movie.
I mean, it's a great problem to have if you're Disney right now, to basically be in competition with yourself.
Essentially. I mean, they're going to be in competition with themselves until probably Ready Player One in late March, and then they'll be in competition with themselves again with Infinity War. It's insane. Let's look at the worldwide box office. Finally, Black Panther tops on that chart. Of course, it has netted over $700 million worldwide. Big asterisks with Japan and China still on the horizon in early March. Now, there's been some early word coming from some Chinese box office analysts that pre-sales for Black Panther are comparable to what they saw for Spider-Man Homecoming, which grossed over $115 million in China. That's just a guess. We'll see how it does, but you could see at least another $100 million on top of this gross from China, which means Black Panther could easily approach the $1 billion worldwide mark as we go. Meanwhile, speaking of China, they continue to make waves. You know, Billy, the last few years, even 4 years ago, we were talking about how much China was contributing to the box office of releases from the United States. The Chinese box office continues to come into its own, still generating 5 of the top 10 highest grossing movies worldwide. Detective Chinatown 2 is grossing $500 million. Operation Red Sea is a movie that blew up in China. That's now number 3. Monster Hunt 2 is a Chinese film. That's at number 4. 50 Shades 3 drops down to number 5. Maze Runner and Insidious dropping down. Forever Young is a Chinese film. The Monkey King 3 is a Chinese film. Padmavat, an Indian film that is still clinging onto a top 10 spot. It might drop out next week. I'm still doing really weird calculations to get that because I cannot find consistent numbers on that. That's my best guess. But yeah, 5 of the 10 highest grossing movies of the year, 2018, Chinese films, largely driven by the Chinese box office. We talk about it every week, but how China, the role that it plays in the U.S. box office and how the role that it plays using its films in the global box office continuing to evolve.
Well, 3 of their 5 highest Chinese ones are sequels, so it looks like they're in the same boat as us when it comes to liking their franchises.
Yeah, they've kind of cracked the formula. I guess learn from the best.
Yeah.
But don't.
Don't learn a lot of our lessons.
Don't learn
please.
any of our lessons. I do want to see some of these movies because they get some releases. There's Wolf Warrior 2, which I still haven't. It's a running joke. Still haven't seen. It was a huge earner from last year, but Detective Chinatown 2 just sounds interesting. Just sounds interesting. Yeah. Monster Hunt 2, they get limited releases here, but it's hard to see everything. Especially
Direct's the point. I just Monster Hunt.
Monster Hunt.
I'm there.
There you go. So that's all the charts that I got, Billy Business. A little bit lighter because I was working on that Annihilation thing, which consider that its own sequel to this video.
Yeah, it's like an addendum to this.
See Appendix A for Annihilation.
Yeah, very interesting. You guys should check it out. I was on the sidelines listening to it, and it's very in-depth reporting.
It is.
I'm very interested to see what happens with all that, and really with Annihilation in general, because I feel like Annihilation with Cloverfield Paradox is starting this trend of like, where will these mega blockbusters end up going?
What's going to happen with these movies that studios deem risky?
Right.
And where do they end up? How are they going to treat them? And what does that mean for the movie-going experience in the future? We'll see.
Anything that's not a Marvel movie will be a Fathom event.
Exactly, yeah. Fathom events. They'll be there to rescue us. Billy Business, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dan.
And thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week with more charts, and Roth and I will be back this week with more reviews, including one of the movies I mentioned earlier, Red Sparrow with Jennifer Lawrence. Also, a movie coming out soon called Love, Simon, which I had a chance to see last week, plus everything else that we always do.
I was hoping it was.
What are you doing?
I was hoping it was
plug,
Detective
Billy?
Chinatown 2,
no,
but I'll have to.
If I can find Detective Chinatown 2. Plus, SJU every morning.
We're always here.
We're always working on something. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.